Indiana State Legislature is getting close to an end. Just another week and a half, I guess, is really maybe less than a week.
Next Wednesday.
All right. So like 3 days.
3 days.
All right. Well, joining us in the studio is Mark Messmer. Mark is the state senator representing this area, and yeah, I guess we're getting down to the end. So we're going to have a pre-summary on this WJTS-inform about what's been happening in the House, in the Senate. Where are we right now? I guess the only thing really hanging is the budget.
There's about 50 bills total that are out there at some level of conference committee work, and people say, well, what in the heck is a conference committee? So, I mean, you have your basic House and Senate committees, and you know that bills get filed and get heard and amended, and but on a conference committee, the difference between that and a regular committee during session is if I author a bill in the Senate, it goes through the Senate, it gets approved in the first half of session in the Senate, it goes to the House. If they make changes to the bill, you know, when it's in the House side of session, it comes back and you have two choices. You can either concur, which means you agree to the changes, and you'll have to go to your fellow caucus members and say, okay, here was my bill, here's where it started, here's how they changed it, I'm okay with it. Do I have the okay to concur to those changes? And if everybody agrees, yep, we'll go ahead and concur. And then you have to vote on it again in the Senate, because if they changed it, you know, both House and Senate both have to have a vote on the same language. So if they've changed it, we do a concurrence vote if I agree to those changes. If I don't agree to those changes, I file what's called a dissent motion, which means I disagree with. And it may be, you know, it may be something that sometimes you file a dissent motion maybe because you didn't disagree to the changes, but there might have been a House or Senate bill that was similar to your legislation that sometimes you file a dissent motion because if you have two pieces of legislation that deal in the same area of law, when they go to compile the records at the end of session, if you pass a law and somebody else passes a law, and then sometimes if they're in the same section of code, the drafters at the end of session aren't clear as to whether one is supposed to, you know, trump the other one, and the last one passed is the one that's the most legally binding. And so sometimes you file a dissent motion because you know there was a House and a Senate bill that were in a similar section of law. So you file a dissent motion to be able to merge the two together and make sure you don't have any conflicting, you know, wording in one that messes up the other one. And so that dissent, that conference committee time can either be because I disagree with the changes and I want to take something out that they added to the bill, or they took something out that I liked. So you can file a dissent motion to either, you know, negotiate or hammer out differences, or sometimes to merge two bills that are in the same section of law to make sure you don't end up with a mess at the end.
Now you said there's the end of session drafters.
We have a group called Legislative Services, and they basically, they maintain, you know, the law library for the state.
Okay. You know, and these are not representatives or senators.
They're full-time attorneys.
Okay. Okay.
And we work with those folks at the beginning of session or during the off-season time, whenever we want to get a bill prepared. We don't type it up and file it ourselves. We work with that same group of attorneys. Legislative Services, you know, you take what you want to do. They take what is in English and then find, you know, the sections of law that needed to be updated to make that happen. At the end of session, they compile all the laws that we've passed, and then recompile that, you know, that set of law books at the end of session. So you have a consistent set of, you know, kind of a law library of all of our most up-to-date code.
How big is that law library?
Too big? When they're sitting on a shelf, there's a stack of books about, you know, that take up about, you know, maybe 3 feet. So, but that covers every code section. You know, I think there's 36 sections of code, and that covers, you know, everything from driving laws to criminal laws to marriage and divorce laws, adoption laws, Medicaid laws. I mean, every hunting laws,
Everything
everything
is
in the
in there.
books, yeah, are in there. So
Well, right now we're then in conference. And you said there's still about 50 bills that are.
about
You're
50
going to have
bills.
a lot to do next week.
It'll be
then.
busy those last 3 days. Obviously, the biggest one, the last one we typically do is the budget, because once the budget's done, that's our only constitutional. Every 2 years we have to do a budget. So once that's done, the motivation for sticking around late into the evening dwindles. So that's usually the last thing we do to make sure everybody sticks around.
Okay, I was going to say, what's the order? The order then is going to try and get these other 50 bills and then go to the budget.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, is it possible that these 50 bills will not pass?
There's a possibility. Yeah, if there's something that you just can't, because and a conference committee, the makeup of those is different than a typical House or Senate committee as well.
Okay.
The author of the bill is usually assigned to be the chairman of that conference committee.
Okay.
And you'll have a House Democrat and Republican and a Senate Democrat and Republican that make up that conference committee. There's usually 4 people that are what they call the conferees. And then there's advisors. If you worked on the bill at all, maybe you weren't the lead author, but you were on either the committee that heard the bill or you were a co-author on the bill. Then there's other House and Senate members. The number's pretty flexible that are called advisors, and you'll participate in the hearings when they go to meet to talk about the bill. You'll usually go to attend, and if you were involved with it, you can say, well, we changed this provision of the bill because of, and you can help provide dialogue and discussion and debate on how to do those final changes. But ultimately, you come up with what they call a conference committee report. That here was the original bill. Here's the changes that we've all agreed to, and then all 4 conferees have to sign that committee report
and say that they agree to the changes. Okay.
So then that committee report goes back to each chamber. House and Senate have to vote on it again. Now, if you take a conference committee report to the House and Senate, maybe it passes in one and doesn't pass in the other, it doesn't mean the bill's dead. It means as long as you don't run out of time, you have time to go back to conference committee and work on it some more. And if it didn't pass one or the other, you can say, well, my chamber didn't approve this final report. Can we try it again? So you've got up until the final day of session to work on maybe revise it again and then come up with another conference committee report and take that back until it either passes both chambers, or if it doesn't pass one or the other and the clock runs out, then the bill dies.
So of these 50 bills, there's a percentage of those that may not either get heard or may not pass?
There's always a half a dozen pieces of
make
legislation that you just get to the end of the session, you just can't come to an agreement, and it never gets brought back to, because then once when you finish your conference committee work, then it's supposed to go back through the rules committee in each chamber to make sure, that you didn't try to sneak something in, that had never been passed in either chamber.
Okay.
So you've got to go through the rules committee to make sure, the bill meets all the qualifications. There's a rule called germaneness. You can't take 2 pieces of legislation that are totally. You can't in conference amend something. You can't amend, maybe a business regulation, in with a family law bill. You can't pull things together that are not connected. Content or the ideas of them have to be germane to each other. And so the rules committee will look through and see what your committee did and make sure everything was on the up and up as far as the rules that we're supposed to follow. Then it goes to the floor in each chamber and gets voted on again. So. But there's always a handful that just don't make it. Okay,
now we have the budget, which is really the final thing, the big thing. How do you think that will play out? Is it looking like it's going to be pretty simple? The budget's not simple, but is it simple to get it through?
We'll get it done for sure. We were hoping that we might be able to get done as early as today, at the beginning of April. But when the revenue forecast came out on April 16th, it was about $100 million per year under what we had projected when they did the December forecast. So if it had been really close, they could have probably made a few adjustments this week, but even $100 million out of $15 billion per year, it's not a lot. I mean, it's a fraction of a percent. And there's pretty much agreement already that the school funding component of the budget will stay as it was prior to, to the forecast coming out. So any of the cuts, it'll either be maybe a capital project at a university, or they'll probably make the other adjustments in all the other spending provisions, whether it comes out of all of them equally or whether they just drop, a handful of spending items off the list and wait to do them, till the next budget comes along. But it's not a lot of percentage-wise, but still, if it's $100 million. The House had slightly different priorities than the Senate, and that conference committee has to meet to agree to how those changes are going to be, work their way through, and so we'll probably get that committee report out Wednesday morning. They'll bring it to the floor for final debating and amending, and typically it's the last thing we do on the last day of session as far as bringing it out for a final vote. So
basically, I think you answered my next question. How do you know what they may have changed? That this capital project got knocked out. The four people. Can somebody stand up and say, "Okay, here's what we did"?
We will when they come out with their final agreement. They'll each conferee will take that product back to the House, Senate, Democrat, Republican caucuses. That's just the meeting of your group of Democrats and Republicans in each chamber. So each caucus will have that here's our final agreed upon changes, and typically before it gets signed, each chamber, each House Democrat, Senate, you'll agree as a group. Okay, Senator Kenley, you have the okay from us to go ahead and sign that report. So that'll probably happen, I would imagine, late afternoon Tuesday evening, that we'll give our conferee the okay to sign off on the final budget. And when all four groups agree, and that's when that process of taking it back through Rules Committee and bringing it to the floor, that final step will kick into action. So we probably won't know until probably sometime Tuesday night, where those cuts occurred, and if there was something in our area that we were hoping, to get funded. If it didn't make the chopping block, we'll find out then.
Okay, and probably too late then to get it changed.
Really can't do much about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess really it's too late for somebody to come to you and say, "Hey, Senator Messmer, there's a new law I think we need to have that I see this, and this." It's probably too late for that this year,
At
right?
this point, it's too late, because if it hasn't passed the House or the Senate, at this point, it's not eligible to be amended in during conference committee. So it's really, anything like that, it's time to start getting ready for next session.
Okay. And that's really what you spend your summer doing, is then somebody comes to you with an idea, and then you can research it and work with others through the summer to see how that would go.
Yeah, that happens every off season. That people bring ideas to you, and you start to do the legwork and the research and looking, maybe what's done in other states, and because sometimes people bring an idea to you that is a new concept, and so that's when and Legislative Services enjoys the earlier you bring those things to them, the better, because long about October, November, December, they get really overloaded. And so it's pretty tough if you bring them something, the later in the year you bring it, the
less likely it is to make it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because sometimes it just takes too much preparation time. So if folks out there have ideas they want to have worked on, the earlier they contact me, the better it is for me as well.
So this coming Wednesday is going to be the end of the session. This was a long session.
Right.
Next year will be a short session. It'll
run from the first Monday in January till about, the deadline I think is about the 15th of March, but usually during the non-budget year, we get done a few days early, typically. I think, anywhere from a week to I think we got done a week early the last 2 non-budget years that I've been up there. So we can get things done a little quicker, because if it's a non-budget year, there's really nothing that you're supposed to just use that short session to make small tweaks to things. It's not, there's very little committee time. There's about 3 weeks of committee time in the House and the Senate, so you don't have a lot of time to hit things, and if it's very complicated, the time is pretty short during non-budget years. So, but we typically get things done a little quicker during the. It's rare to get done early during budget session. So,
but we do want to point out that, you know, even though your sessions end next Wednesday, you still work throughout spring and summer and fall, and winter, I guess, too.
We do, because you'll start in May. A lot of times there'll be requests for summer study committees, so all of those requests go into the group that does that analysis, and then usually in June, you know, the committee that looks at all of the requests for summer study committees, you know, makes the assignments. You get assigned, you know, individuals get assigned to those committees in June. The bills get assigned. The ideas get assigned to different committees, and then long about July, you start getting your summer study committee groups together. You meet with the other members of the summer study, maybe your co-chairman, because there's usually a House and Senate, you know, co-chairman on those summer study committees. And then August, September, October is when you meet every week or two, you know, to go through those study topics. And a lot of times drafts for legislation will come out of those. I mean, that's the intent of those, is to take a little bit longer time to, you know, to discuss issues that might be more complicated than you can get done in a couple weeks of committee time during session, and prepare bills for next year. So that off-season time still gets can still get pretty busy. We are part-time, but we go year-round. We're just not there, you know, 4 or 5 days a week the rest of the year.
Well, good luck with the last 3 days of this year's session, and look forward to talking to you next week and kind of get a summary of what has happened.
Very good.
All right, our guest has been Senator Mark Messmer, representing this district. We thank you for watching WJTS Inform. We certainly appreciate the Senator coming in and talking to us every Friday. Join us again next week. This is WJTS. We are local people watching local people.